I don't necessarily always agree with the fact that for small businesses, it's about access. I think the access points are there. I think it's about having the understanding of how to get to those access points.
Hello, I'm Zahra Amanpour with Main Street Assembly, and I am thrilled today to be speaking with Jeanette Nigro from Perch Advisors. Jeanette and I have worked at the intersection of economic development and community development for 2 decades. We have been allies, we have been partners, we have been friends, and I am just thrilled to have this conversation with you, Jeanette. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get started. I met you before you had Perch Advisors, but you've been running it for some time now. Can you give us a little bit of history as to how it got started, why you started it, and what is it up to? What are you doing these days?
Sure thing. So we just hit our 11-year milestone, and we
Congratulations.
celebrated last year for our decade in inception. And as you pointed out, we've worked together in the space for more than 20 years. My nonprofit career started overseeing workforce and economic development at the Brooklyn Chamber. And I spent a wonderful decade really in the central to the Renaissance of Brooklyn, as I like to call it. It was all the most significant thinkers and people building Brooklyn at that time. And then Hurricane Sandy hit. I had a new boss, and in that moment, it was gloves were off. You went where you were needed. So I spent probably about 4 or so months working disaster recovery, helping small businesses with emergency lending and other support services in Coney Island. And then living in the Rockaways, I would come home at night and then door knock to our businesses with their generators to see if I could support at home. Working with the other chambers played a key role in building kind of a citywide infrastructure that was really deployed on the ground to help folks. And then after that moment, there was, how do we help for long-term recovery? So then it was like, how do we raise money, for the organization to make sure that we can build an infrastructure around supporting businesses that were going to take a really, really long time to get back online. And in that moment, I guess emerging out of 2013 and having now worked citywide in collaboration with the other chambers, I really thought a lot about what it would be like to take the work that I did, blow the walls off of it from a neighborhood perspective, and really serve communities that were particularly underserved in the type of expert and strategic support. I don't necessarily always agree with the fact that for small businesses, it's about access. I think the access points are there. I think it's about having the understanding of how to get to those access points and leveling the playing field at the neighborhood level. So I guess at about mid-year of 2014, I walked into my boss's office at the time. I said, I'm quitting. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I don't know yet. And I took the second half of 2014 just poking around and starting to build a solo consulting practice. And in about a year, I realized that the demand was greater than I could do on my own. So in the end of 2015, I hired my first employee. So there was Perch Advisors. And it was really, incredibly difficult to, I think, start to navigate the space where consultants were or where they had to be. And I think we really started the business with a values-based model that we wanted to serve neighborhoods that couldn't afford the expert strategic consulting that other folks, could with bigger organizations and bigger business and not-for-profit. So that was kind of how we started. It continues to be our mission to serve smaller neighborhoods. That doesn't mean we don't serve the big guys too and the big clients, but primarily the folks that we're really seeking to ultimately support our small businesses in neighborhoods that lack the infrastructure or the resources. So that's probably the shortest version of that story I could give you.
That's amazing. And congratulations. That's
Thanks.
incredible to go through that journey and get to where you are now. And I know for a fact that you have become a extremely trusted person in the communities that you serve, with the people, with the partners that you serve. So that has, I think, given you a kind of a bird's eye view also of what is happening. You just spoke about your journey pre-Sandy, when Brooklyn was booming and becoming what now is a brand, right? And then you went through Sandy, which was a devastating thing for New York City and this whole area, the whole tri-state area. And you've been through COVID and all of these sort of ups and downs. And right now, we are in a period two. I don't know what to call this period, but it's a period. It's a very different, it's an intense period. With your view, both as from within being a business owner, having employees sitting in that seat, but also your bird's eye view of the what's happening to small businesses, the ecosystem. What do you think is happening? What are the sort of day-to-day things that most people don't know about that small businesses are either struggling with or stepping into or kind of embracing? What does that look like right now?
I think the general sentiment from a lot of businesses is it's not one particularly big thing, but it's kind of like a paper cuts, right? So if we look at it from the citywide level, and I know that this current administration has said that they are going to or have rolled out ways to reduce the burden for small businesses. I think the result of that and the rollout of that remains to be seen. I think every administration up until this point in my recent memory has said the same thing. And so I will be very interested to see what that means from a policy and a regulatory perspective once it's put into to play at the citywide level. But I think more broadly, and I know we'll talk about AI in a few minutes, but I'll put that on a shelf for a moment. Costs just continue to increase for every type of small business in one way or another. So general operating costs across the board are probably twice as much as they were pre-pandemic. That is the cost of health insurance. If you're an employer that wants to be the best employer that you can and offer health insurance, well, guess what? That cost has doubled in 5 years. The cost of general operating insurance, the cost of labor, all of the cost of goods sold, all of those costs have gone up. And so it now becomes increasingly more expensive to run the same small business that you did pre-COVID. We were fortunate enough to work on a pretty industrious project out in Queens, helping deploy no-cost setups for dining out in one particular congressional district, thanks to funding from Congresswoman Meng. And our job was to take the prior DOT approved dining out restaurants and help them to get re-engaged in the 2.0 version of the project and make sure that they were both compliant. And then in partnership with the city's Department of Small Business Services, help them to build and install new dining out setups. And I think what we heard from the majority of the businesses was that the process, not our process to get them set up, but the process from the city, both to apply with DOT, wait for the approval time, coordinate with the community board, get the setups approved and deployed in time to make, any type of real additional revenue off of it, was just not working. Now, we were successful. We got, I think, 55 setups deployed in a period of 9 months.
Wow.
And that was pretty remarkable. And they're very beautiful and we're very proud of them. But the system, and I know my colleague Andrew Ridgey from the New York City Hospitality Alliance, beats the drum on how to make dining out a better program for all restaurants citywide. But I got to tell you, if you're going to run a restaurant business in New York City, you really have to be pretty crazy. The costs are so high, and it becomes increasingly difficult to keep any type of profit margin. I think the thing that people forget about small business owners, because we glamorize the idea of owning a small business, is that many small business owners are just getting by themselves. They're not making buckets of money. They are putting much of their income and their assets back into the business. Many cases, they're more worried about their employees' well-being than their own. Many cases, not all. So just these continual stacks of cost increases make it really, really challenging to run a business. I don't know that I felt that way 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but I definitely feel it acutely now, both from a personal perspective of running a business, but also working with businesses throughout the city.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's playing out, I think, in so many different ways with small
Right.
businesses, but that's the sort of underlining thread across the board, is the cost of doing business. And I think all Americans are experiencing that to some extent in different ways, right? In some places very drastically, in some ways, some circumstances very drastically. But I think that small businesses are kind of taking the brunt of that in some ways, and because they're getting hit personally, and then on a layer on top of that, which is what's happening in their businesses and to the things you've talked about. So you have employees,
I do.
talk to me about how you have been able to sort of build up your team a little bit, and you mentioned the challenges of I've seen you yourself struggle with this, of like trying to create a wonderful team, a wonderful culture amongst your people. What's happening there, and what are some of the challenges around that you're experiencing?
That's a great question. So I think we also take a values-based approach to our hiring. And a colleague pointed this out to me when I guess nobody else noticed it. We long ago removed a educational requirement for our roles. That doesn't mean that folks don't have higher education, but we removed it as a requirement. I think it's prohibitively it becomes a barrier for folks that might have a tremendous amount of skill or experience to enter into a firm where they're required to have some type of discipline or specific educational level. So that's one thing. We really hire from a skills and a values based approach, and that's very important to me personally. I don't think college made me who I was today, although I learned a lot. But without a degree or with a degree, I don't know that I would be in a very different position. I will say though, in the way that we approach our work, we're very people focused from a client perspective. When we work on projects, we deeply engage in our communities. We really try to understand our neighborhoods and our clients and the work that they do from the inside out. So I'm really looking for folks that join our team to have a very deep understanding of how people in neighborhoods work. Folks that have worked in, believe it or not, hospitality make great Perch
Uh-huh.
employees, and many of the folks on our team have at some point worked in hospitality because they're used to having to kind of keep up in an environment where every next person is different, and you're learning over time how to train yourself in an environment where you have to be responsive to different types of people and different types of needs. It also helps them deal with the day-to-day stressors of having to deal with folks that are not always happy. So that's really been our approach to hiring. Other than that, we've got a really interesting and eclectic group. Many, we've had urban planners come through our door. Some of our most trusted colleagues are urban planners. We just hired our first data and research associate, that their
Nice.
role full time is to work on data, and it's become increasingly more important in the work that we do. And he is a younger CUNY grad, and he's brilliant, and he'd be brilliant without that CUNY degree. But we love folks that approach the work in a very curious way, that are always looking to solve problems, to bring a new level of perspective or a different asset to the table. So that curiosity is really also what we're looking for. So I've got a great team. We have pretty low turnover and high retention, which I think speaks to um, how cohesive this team is and how important the work, and not just the work that we do, but the approach to the work that we do, is to them personally on a personal level. So I couldn't be prouder of the folks that I work with, that I get to work with every day.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I know that you care a lot about it, and you think about it and put effort into it, and it shows. It really shows when with your people. So let's switch gears. I'm not at a point yet where I'm willing to call AI an employee yet, and I don't know that I ever will be. But nevertheless, that's where the world we're living in 2026, right?
Right.
People are building whole companies like that. But with you, where do you sit with AI? from both the perspective of like in your own operations and how it plays out there, and how do you use it and what do you hope it does for your business. It's still early for all of us to know for sure, but what do you think it's doing for your business and why do you use it? And then from a bigger perspective, what do you think it's doing to your market, to the people that you work with, to your partners, to the world that you operate in, the ecosystem that you operate in? What do you think's happening there?
It's funny because I think we had a very light touch conversation on AI about a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
and I was barely touching it at that point. And I think many people were. The rate at which use of AI has accelerated is really remarkable. And I think versus a year and a half ago, people don't like completely get frightened when you say AI. It's like, a year and a
Uh-huh.
half ago, people are like, I'm not touching this. Now it's a very different answer to a question. So I think we use AI with awareness in the day-to-day work that we're doing. And I say that because, and somebody very, very smart said to me recently, and I might have shared this with you the last time we spoke, it's a tool in the toolbox, right? So
Yes.
if you think about AI as a, squarely adjacent tool in the whole, spectrum of tools that you use, then you're thinking about it almost as an accessory to the day-to-day work. So I think what we have started to do is adopt AI as an accessory. So how does it help our day-to-day operations? We're using an AI automated bookkeeping system that saves us probably hours upon hours of work a month.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't eliminate my bookkeeper. It just makes both of our jobs easier and probably a little bit faster. So that's been one kind of like obvious operational way. What we're cautious of is to not allow AI to think or write for us where it is replacing or even supplanting the place that we should be in our critical thinking or how we deploy our thinking or resources externally. So what does that mean? It means that we're not, putting a product into AI and asking it to rewrite it for us or refine it. We're giving maybe a couple of prompts to help generate some ideas or create an outline versus
Yep.
an entire body of work. And I say that, and I'm not sure if you've heard this recently in the work that you do, but several funders, so private philanthropy, are taking proposals that are coming in for grants. They are running it through AI. And if it's a certain percentage of generated AI work, they're immediately rejecting them without reading them. That's telling, right? It means that
Yeah.
the folks that fund programs and, perhaps someday down the line, the folks that fund businesses are looking for content that has not been generated by someone else or dare I say a third party.
Uh-huh.
And so that's important to me because, we as consultants, we get paid to think. Obviously we get paid to do, but we get paid to think. And I don't want to consider the way that our work would shift if we were using or leaning too heavily on AI to do things that as individuals with experience would be doing. So there's a lot of nuance in there, I think. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, I would say that we're using it just enough. But it's certainly it's not like core to our business model. On the flip side, I will say that there is an opportunity with AI because small businesses, by and large, are pretty hands off when it comes to AI. And when I mean small businesses, I mean your local neighborhood based businesses. Generally speaking, I wouldn't label a percentage of it, but there's probably a good large chunk of smaller businesses that are just not leaning in at all. So I think there's
Yeah.
a space in between for everybody, and it certainly depends on the business model or the type of businesses. But there's still more work to be done to help businesses become less wary of AI and also find ways that it can help improve their business. Lastly, I think AI will just make us busier because it just creates better workflows and the ability to do more in less time in some
Yeah.
occasions. So I'm just finding that, as we're integrating this, it is saving time to a certain degree, but it's also kind of speeding up tasks in a way that leaves more room for more work. So take those thoughts as you may.
No, that's very insightful. So, let me going back to how you ideally have AI in your business. And please correct me if I'm oversimplifying what you said, but it sounds like the front end of your business, your customers, what you're paid to actually do, the interactions, the thoughts, the sort of engagement, the actual execution of the work. There, you want that to stay human first, if not human only, right? And then the back end, the more sort of administrative, like what your example you gave of bookkeeping, the back end, the repetitive, mundane stuff that doesn't really speak to who you are, doesn't build your expertise, all of that, or your credibility in the market, that you're much more comfortable sort of AI taking bigger chunks of. Would that be inaccurate?
I would say yes, but
Please.
our experience as well has also shown us that AI is wrong as much as it's right. So I think there
Yeah.
is still a step beyond any of the back end administrative or operational work that we're leveraging AI to do that still continually needs to be checked and checked and checked again, because I think early on we're like, this is great. Wow, look how much time I saved. And then just taking this, whatever the final product was of AI generation, and like passing it along. And then in spot checks, we're recognizing that AI produces a lot of errors. And so the yes, but is your assessment is right. But we are really continually cautious about what it produces, even on the back end, because that has the potential to make mistakes that could really impact the business overall. So yes, but is the answer.
I agree with that. I had a business owner come to me recently, so excited that they had built an agent and it was going to take care of like a huge administrative burden for the business. And I was like, that's really cool. And they wanted to show it to me. And I was like, wow, you really did a lot of work here. And you could tell that the person had been trying to be very thoughtful about how the AI and what the AI should do. And I said, so where's the checkpoints in this? And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, where are you making sure that this AI is generating the right data, the right answers, doing the right thing, right, making the right decisions? And no checkpoints had been worked in because they were just so excited about the fact that like they had covered it from point A to point Z, right? And I was like, okay, but point C, M, all of these points need a checkpoint, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. There's definitely a big but when it comes to that. And in the market, you said busier, and that really resonates with me too, because I'm already feeling that. I'm like, okay, I know I can get these things done a little bit quicker, but now I have to do these 10 other things quicker too to keep up with that,
Right.
right? So, yeah,
Right.
I get that. What does that mean in terms of the authenticity of the market and what's happening? And who are the people in the market, and sort of how do you sift through that in terms of, what can you trust, what you can't trust, and all of that? How does that play out for you?
I'll go back to something. I sent my kids a really funny photo or video about a month ago, and they're like, Mom, that's AI. And I was like, could have fooled me. It was something that was probably, in retrospect, was probably pretty unbelievable. But we're in a space right now where you just have to you have to do a little more due diligence, I think, right?
Uh-huh.
And it lends itself to being faked out. A good colleague of mine who I've known for more than a decade always pointed out to me early in my time as a consultant. He's like, if you're 10% better than the best consultant out there, you're doing the community a service, meaning that most consultants may seem great on paper, but deploy them to actually get the work done. And many consultants are just kind of average at best. So
Yeah.
I think what we're looking at is an average at best scenario, and where I hope the last 11 years has put us in a pretty crowded space of consultants in New York City. That's a very big market, obviously, is our reputation comes before us, and that's not something that can be built in a short period of time, and it certainly can't be built with AI. So what I think is there is probably going to be a wave for maybe a long time of folks producing early work products that seem to be really meeting a mark for a particular project or client, but then don't have the durability to actually execute in the way that it may seem to play out on paper. Framed a different way, um, AI will allow the marketplace to be even more flooded with other types of consultants or consulting firms or parts of practices that are going to leverage AI to try to elevate their work or increase the number of clients that they take on. But the durability will show, I think, after a couple of years as to how that plays itself out in execution. So, as with any new tool, we're cautiously optimistic, but I feel very strongly about, um, how we've built this firm, again, from a values-based approach, and that there's part of that, hopefully, that can't be replaced in the marketplace. So,
Absolutely. Your reputation is impeccable. So I think you absolutely have that, and we all have to hold on to that as we get through the whatever this wave is that we're going through right now. So tell me, what does the future hold for Perch Advisors? What are you hopeful about? What are you looking forward to? What are you all building? What's ahead?
so we've been thinking, what's ahead? You never know, right? We never knew in March 2020 what was ahead, but we've been thinking a lot about two things. One is, as a New York City based firm and deeply invested in neighborhoods, what are the aspects of our work that can be replicated and deployed in other places across the country? We know that there's fundamental aspects of what we do, like community engagement, that have universal principles, but the nuance is how communities function at a very block by block level, and how
Uh-huh.
do we kind of set our sights around different marketplaces where we feel like our approach to the work that we do, let's say with bids, can really be replicated in other places. There as well, particularly in our bid portfolio, and to some degree in the work that we do with our workforce clients. We've worked up and down the East Coast by and large. But as we look at other places like Florida or California, the bid laws are very different. How um, the general public and also policymakers are involved are very different processes. So we've spent a fair amount of time thinking about that and how do we determine if competing in other marketplaces is like a worthwhile endeavor. And I think that that hinges too on like how big do we want to go. So
Yeah.
last year was a tricky year. It was kind of the downspout of COVID. And so we did see a shift in our business last year versus the 5 years prior, which was noticeable. And we've thought deeply about how we go into 2026 and 2027. But what I think we do know is that the neighborhood based work being grounded in communities day to day is very much part of why we're doing this work.
Uh-huh.
And so that question comes up on a regular basis. Where do we want to be? How do we want to continue to do this? And how do we want to continue to grow? So that's kind of the space that we're sitting in now. We have also been thinking a lot about, as the firm has matured and our team has matured in their work, how are we operationalizing some of the products and services that we offer to our nonprofit and government clients. So that's been on our docket for this year as well, and we kind of continue to inch closer to more of kind of a toolkit based model, things that are a little bit more turnkey, places where a client would need us less and could rely on the tools more. And so that's kind of another area that we're continuing to dig a little deeper into. So that's where we're at right now. I'm not sure what I'm hopeful about yet. I think we're just thinking about, continuing to expand our footprint here in the city and just reach more neighborhoods. So that always excites me and my team as well.
Well, as a mission driven business, I think you are not only creating opportunity, but hope for the communities that you work in too. So I think um, that's a beautiful thing that Perch Advisors does. And the two things that you mentioned, I'm like, wow, those are big. ambitious goals, both difficult for their own reasons, but
Right, right.
nevertheless worthwhile, I think. And definitely you have the muscle power personally and with your team to do it. So I look forward to seeing all of that happen and continuing to think with you, partner with you, and hopefully grow together.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you.